What if I told you that somewhere deep in the African jungle, something moves, something so large, so ancient, that it defies all known science, a serpent as long as a school bus, its head wide as a car, slithering silently through the trees like a forgotten god? In 1959, a Belgian military pilot claimed to have seen it with his own eyes, not in myth, not in story, but in reality. Since then, whispers have grown louder, tribal legends, vanished expeditions, secret files locked away for decades. Could it be real? Or is it all a carefully buried lie? Today, we unravel the truth behind one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries of our time, the legend of the Katanga giant snake. This is an ordinary python no longer than 9 meters, but what you're looking at now is no ordinary serpent. It is said to measure 15 meters in length, the Katanga giant snake, a creature so massive it could devour a small car whole. In 1959, during the height of Cold War tension, the Royal Belgian Air Force was patrolling the skies over the dense Congolese jungle. What they encountered would not only baffle scientists, it would shake the very pillars of modern biology. From the cockpit of a low-hovering helicopter, Colonel Remy van Lierde witnessed something impossible. Slithering beneath the canopy was a snake, broader than the hood of a car, longer than 2 grown anacondas, placed end to end. This was no cinematic illusion. It was a real-life event sealed within top-secret military archives for over 6 decades. So now we must ask, do you believe the Katanga giant snake truly existed? And if it did, why has there never been irrefutable proof? But if it didn't, then why have the reports never stopped? Was it the hallucination of a wartime pilot? The mythic echoes of an isolated tribe? Or something far more ancient and real than science dares to admit? Keep listening as we travel into the forgotten corners of Africa and confront the mystery of a beast that shouldn't exist. In the next 5 minutes, you will hear 3 pieces of evidence so baffling, even seasoned biologists cannot explain them. The second one alone may shatter everything you thought you knew. It begins in 1959, while global superpowers waged a silent war of espionage and arms. In the wild heart of Africa, Colonel Remy van Lierde took flight in a Sikorsky H-21 helicopter, a routine patrol through the jungles of Katanga. The skies were clear, the view unobstructed. But as his aircraft passed above the emerald canopy, something caught his eye. Unnatural movement, a stirring below. He descended for a closer look. What he saw next was so shocking, so far beyond comprehension, that even his years of military service could not prepare him. Coiled beneath the trees was a serpent of unprecedented size, at least 15 meters long, its head nearly as wide as a car. To put that into perspective, the average reticulated python stretches only 6 meters. This creature was more than double that. The very laws of biology rewritten in an instant. What happened next was even more disturbing. As the helicopter drew closer, the giant snake did not retreat. It rose, slowly, deliberately. It lifted its massive body upward, hissed like steel on stone, and assumed an aggressive stance. A direct challenge to the aircraft. This behavior was the opposite of what snakes typically do when threatened. Van Lierde pulled up and away immediately, shaken. Upon returning to base, he recorded the entire incident in an official flight report, one that included a photograph of the creature. That report, along with the image, was marked classified and locked in a vault by the Royal Air Force. To this day, the photograph has never been released. So again, we must ask, if this were nothing but a misidentification, why hide it under layers of secrecy? Why mark it as top secret? What exactly are they protecting? And why, in the next 5 minutes, you will hear 3 pieces of evidence so baffling, even seasoned biologists cannot explain them. The second one alone may shatter everything you thought you knew. Long before his encounter, the legend of the Katanga giant snake had already coiled itself into the oral history of local tribes. Among them, it is known as Kongali scripted, a name whispered with fear, often avoided altogether. But it wasn't just legend. In the 1930s, a European expedition team vanished deep within the Katanga jungle while searching for rare minerals. They were never heard from again. Months later, local hunters stumbled upon their abandoned camp. Tents torn apart, supplies scattered, the ground disturbed, as if something massive had swept through. The most chilling detail, enormous snake-like tracks dragging through the vegetation, accompanied by crushed foliage that suggested something heavy had passed something alive. 2 decades later, another account emerged. In the 1950s, a missionary named Marcus Freeman documented in his private journal a harrowing encounter near the Congo River. As he performed a baptism ceremony near the water's edge, the tall grass behind him stirred violently. Rising from it came a snake so long, its exposed body surpassed the length of the village church. Its scales shimmered like dull metal under the sun. Its head rose high and let out a screech, not a hiss, but a sound like metal grinding against stone. Freeman was frozen. When he later asked villagers about the serpent, their reactions were unsettling. They went silent, avoided eye contact, refused to speak further, as if even mentioning the creature was a forbidden act, a taboo, a sacred fear buried deep in the cultural memory of the region. From 1930 to the present day, there have been at least 17 reported sightings of the Katanga giant snake in the Congo region. And remarkably, most of these reports describe a creature between 12 and 15 meters in length. Could such consistency truly be a coincidence? Could all witnesses from seasoned pilots to tribal elders be hallucinating the same impossible beast? For skeptics, these might seem like tales blown out of proportion. But then came something new. In the era of social media and digital eyes everywhere, the legend reawakened. A blurry video began circulating online, said to have been filmed near a remote river or lake in the Congo. The footage is shaky, low in quality but within the murky water. A massive shadow twists and coils, briefly surfacing before vanishing again beneath the surface. Believers hailed it as proof. Deniers called it a hoax. Some claimed the location wasn't even in Africa. But for those who had heard the stories, those who had walked the forest trails of Katanga, it looked all too familiar. So what are we left with? A series of military encounters, a trail of vanished expeditions, a video that sparks more questions than answers. And yet, no bones, no specimen, no definitive proof. Could it be that the Katanga giant snake is a surviving species, unrecognized by science, one hidden in the dense, largely unexplored Congo basin, which remains one of the most biodiverse and understudied ecosystems on Earth? Biologists estimate that more than 30% of the species in this vast region have yet to be formally discovered. In that context, the idea of an unknown serpent doesn't sound quite so impossible, especially when a highly trained military pilot, under clear skies, reported seeing such a creature from just meters away. Van Leerde's account with all its military weight stands as perhaps the strongest testimony we have. Yet for every compelling witness, there are glaring gaps. The most obvious physical evidence. In over a century, no skeleton, no scale, no verifiable remains of a 15-meter serpent have ever been recovered. For a creature of such size, that defies logic. If it lived and died in the jungle, why has not a single body been found? And more critically, how could such a massive predator survive unseen? For generations, the ecological demands alone are staggering. A serpent over 15 meters in length would require vast amounts of food to sustain its metabolism. Based on known metabolic rates of existing large snakes, such a creature would need to consume prey roughly the size of a small hippo every month. Does the Congo Basin, wild and rich, though it is truly, harbor enough undisturbed territory, enough large prey to support such a beast? Add to this the issue of habitat. A giant snake would need not only food, but secluded shelter, abundant water, and a stable climate. With modern human expansion, satellite surveillance, and environmental degradation, such undisturbed pockets of jungle are rapidly shrinking, and so arises the next theory. One darker, more conspiratorial. What if the Katanga giant snake wasn't a natural species at all, but a product of Cold War experimentation? During the mid-20th century, covert military and biological experiments were rampant across both sides of the Iron Curtain. Some suggest that the creature witnessed by Van Lierde may have been a genetic anomaly, a biological weapon, a lab-grown predator that escaped into the wild. A failed experiment. A shadow from a secret war. Is this why the photo and report were locked away? Is this why Van Lierde's story was never fully released to the public? Some even claim without confirmation that the colonel mysteriously disappeared in the years after the encounter, vanishing without explanation. But like so many whispers tied to the Cold War, this too could be just a myth, a modern legend built atop an older one. Still, the theory of a Cold War creature remains deeply speculative. There is no hard evidence, no documents, no declassified files from the Soviet Union or the United States that mention the creation of a giant serpent. Technologically, engineering such a creature in the 1950s would have been nearly impossible. The biological complexity, the risks of containment failure, the sheer impracticality of it all argue against it. Even the tale of Colonel Van Lierde's disappearance lacks verification. No credible source confirms it. It could simply be another urban legend, stacked upon a pile of uncertainty. And yet, one final piece of evidence remains. Something never fully acknowledged by mainstream science, something that might change everything. From a biological perspective, the Katanga giant snake's most astounding trait is its size, over 15 meters long. That would make it larger than any living snake today. The current record holder, the reticulated python or the green anaconda, rarely exceeds 9 meters. The only known snake to reach such a scale was Titano boa, a prehistoric serpent that lived 60 million years ago, estimated to stretch between 12 and 15 meters in length. In other words, the Katanga giant snake, if real, would rival a creature believed extinct for over 60 million years. But how could such a being exist now? Experts argue that modern snake physiology can't support such size. Larger bodies require more complex bone structure, better heat regulation, and massive amounts of oxygen challenges that increase exponentially as length increases. Add to that the burden of molting, digestion, and movement all become nearly impossible past a certain scale. Unless the Katanga giant snake possesses a physiology unknown to science, a mutation, an ancient relic, or something else entirely. Then comes the deadliest argument: ecology. A snake of that size would demand extraordinary amounts of food to survive. Based on modern metabolic rates, such a serpent would need to devour the equivalent of a small antelope or river pig every few weeks just to sustain itself. That means active, successful hunts of large prey in dense jungle conditions repeatedly. The Congo Basin, though rich in biodiversity, is not an endless buffet. And if this creature truly existed in stable numbers, where are the carcasses? The missing livestock? The empty campsites? Moreover, a predator of this magnitude would require a vast territory, stable climate, high humidity, constant access to fresh water, and perhaps most crucially, an ecosystem untouched by human expansion. But in our world of growing deforestation, poaching, mining, and exploration, truly untouched wilderness is shrinking. And yet, no satellite, no drone, no camera trap has ever captured a Katanga giant snake in clear detail. So, how could a creature the size of a bus continue to hide in the modern age, to reproduce, to maintain a population, to evade every scientific team and survey effort for over half a century? The odds are astronomical, yet the legend refuses to die. Scholars remain split. Some, the cautious explorers, argue that there are still countless pockets of the Congo we have never penetrated, that human arrogance assumes we have cataloged every living thing, when in truth, we have only scratched the surface. That in the shadows of myth, there may still lie biology yet unrecognized. After all, history has proven that legends from gorillas to giant squid often begin as rumors. Others, however, remain firm. Herpetologists, biologists, ecologists. They cite the overwhelming lack of evidence, the absence of bone, the implausibility of size, the burden of physics, the impossibility of sustaining such an apex predator unnoticed in a shrinking wilderness. They argue that the Katanga giant snake is likely nothing more than folklore, illusions, misidentifications, or worse, deliberate fabrications. And yet, the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to dismiss entirely. Because if the Katanga giant snake never existed, why do so many people from so many different walks of life, tribespeople, missionaries, explorers, and trained military personnel describe the same thing? Why would a Belgian colonel risk his reputation and career by filing a fabricated report into military records, complete with a classified photo? Why would local villagers treat the serpent as taboo, not merely a myth to be shared, but a forbidden secret never to be spoken aloud? These are not just inconsistencies. They are fractures in the wall of certainty. And within those cracks lies the haunting possibility that science, for all its rigor, may have missed something. Perhaps the Katanga giant snake isn't just a question of biology or zoology, but something deeper. A mirror to our fear of the unknown, a reflection of the wilderness that still resists our control. It may never be proven. We may never find its skin, or bones, or eggs. But the story itself, scattered through reports, whispers, and jungle shadows, now lives on as part of modern cryptozoological myth, whether real or imagined. The Katanga giant snake has earned its place in the growing canon of mysteries science has yet to solve. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the snake isn't just a monster in the trees, but a symbol of our hunger to discover, of our unease with what hides beyond the map's edge. In a world increasingly measured by satellite and algorithm, legends like this one remind us that the Earth is still wild, still haunted, still full of questions we haven't yet dared to ask. So now we ask you, Do you believe a 15-meter serpent roams the forests of Central Africa? Or is it just the echo of old fears and older stories? Share this tale with someone you trust. Ask them if they stood deep in the jungle and saw a shadow coil through the grass. Longer than a truck. Rising toward them, would they take the photo, or would they run? Exploration never ends. And perhaps, just perhaps, the truth waits beyond the next bend in the trail. And so, the journey into the heart of the Katanga mystery reaches its end for now. We began with a whisper from the jungle, a classified report, a shadow in the trees. We followed it through legends passed down by firelight, through the silence of villagers who refused to speak, through a missionary's terrified journal and a pilot's sworn testimony. We examined theories from prehistoric survivors to Cold War experiments, from misunderstood wildlife to mass delusion. Each offered answers, but none gave certainty. What remains are fragments like broken bones scattered in the soil of time, a blurry photo that never surfaced, a name that provokes fear across cultures, a string of encounters too similar to ignore, yet too unverified to confirm. And caught in between is the very essence of human inquiry, the line between wonder and proof, between belief and skepticism. Science demands evidence, and rightly so. Without it, we have only stories. But stories matter. They are how we map the unknown, how we preserve the glimpses of the extraordinary before they vanish forever. The Katanga giant snake may never slither into a laboratory, may never leave behind the fossil that would silence all doubt. But perhaps it doesn't need to. Perhaps its true legacy lies not in its scales or its roar, but in the questions it leaves behind, in the sense of awe it rekindles. Because in a world obsessed with certainty, sometimes it's the mysteries that keep us moving forward, the unexplained that keeps our eyes open, the legends that keep our hearts wild. This has been our exploration of the Katanga giant snake, a creature unseen, unheard, yet never fully forgotten. The forest holds its breath, the shadows keep their secrets, and we, the seekers, continue to listen. So now, the final question lingers not just in the minds of scientists and skeptics, but in yours. Was the Katanga giant snake ever real? Or is it the echo of our ancient instinct to fear what slithers in the dark? It may be a biological impossibility, a relic of imagination born from jungle shadows and wartime tension, but it may also be something more, a truth buried beneath roots and rivers, waiting for the right moment to rise again. And that is what gives this legend its enduring power. Not proof, but possibility. Not facts, but fascination. In the clash between reason and mystery, between satellite images and oral traditions, the Katanga giant snake remains not merely as a cryptid or curiosity, but as a monument to everything we don't yet know about our world. Because, in the end, some questions are meant to haunt us. Some stories are meant to live just out of reach. They are the breath in the jungle, the ripple in the water, the sound that wakes you in the night and leaves you wondering. What if? So the next time you hear a rustle in the leaves, the next time you stand near a riverbank in a foreign land and feel something watching, remember this story. Remember the pilot. Remember the silence of the villagers. Remember the shape in the water. And ask yourself if truth can hide in plain sight for 60 years. What else have we not seen? This was the legend of the Katanga giant snake. And though our tale ends here, the search for truth never does. Because truth, like the jungle itself, is never still. It shifts, it hides, It waits. And sometimes, it stares back through the undergrowth. Massive. Silent. Older than time. Whether the Katanga giant snake is myth or monster, hoax or holdover from an ancient world, one thing is certain: it has captured the human imagination for nearly a century, and that, in itself, gives it a kind of life, a pulse, a shadow that moves not just through the trees, but through our minds. Some will dismiss it as fantasy. Others will chase it to the edge of obsession. But in every whispered tale around a fire, in every yellowed field report tucked into forgotten archives, in every blurred frame of shaky footage, something remains. Something unexplained, something unresolved. We live in an age of knowledge, of data, of high-definition certainty. And yet, stories like this remind us how much we still don't know, how many corners of the earth remain dark, uncharted, and wild. The Katanga giant snake may be one of those mysteries we never solve, and maybe that's exactly what keeps it alive. So keep asking, keep wondering, keep exploring, because out there, beyond the reach of maps and the grasp of logic, something may still be waiting. Something long, something ancient, something we once feared, and perhaps should still fear. The jungle doesn't give up its secrets easily, but it never stops whispering them either.